This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 491, OpenY. On today's show, we're talking about OpenY, a distribution for YMCAs, why it was created, and how it is in use today, with our guests, Avi Schwab and Brent Wilker. We'll also cover AI media image as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today, our guests are Avi Schwab and Brent Wilker. Avi came to Drupal for the community and has been active in it since 2008. He is a founding organizer of MidCamp, Midwest Open Source Alliance, and the Event Organizers Working Group. For pay, he supports over 40 YMCA associations in the US and Canada. For fun, he bikes, bakes, and enjoys time with his family. Avi, welcome to the show.
Hey folks, thanks for having me. It's good to be here for my last show.
And thank you for joining us for the last 3 episodes. This is your last official duty as guest host. What is the last thing that you baked? Just curious.
So I've been baking sourdough for a couple years. I started like late pandemic sourdough bread. So yeah,
Got it.
it's super fun getting flour from like a farm that's like 60 miles away, and it's pretty awesome.
That is awesome. And now I'm hungry. Also joining us, Brent has been a Drupal agency sales and marketing guy since 2014. Brent, thanks for joining us.
My intro is a lot lighter than obvious. Nice to meet you.
I appreciate that as the guy that has to read the intro. I like to give everybody their fair introduction, but sometimes they get lengthy. Well, listeners, I'm John Picozzi, solution architect at EPAM, and today my co-host is Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development. Howdy, Nick.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. Looking forward to learning about OpenY.
Yes. But before we do that, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, John. Have you ever wanted to use AI to generate images and save them directly into the Drupal media library once you have the result you want? There's a module for that. It's called AI Media Image, and it was created in February of 2025 by a user who goes by Coffee Machine, and it has a 1.0.0 -2 -alpha 2 release available, which works with Drupal 10.2 and 11. It is actively maintained. In fact, it's pretty much brand new. It has security coverage technically, but needs a stable release. And it has 2 open issues, neither of which are bugs, which is not bad considering it's officially in use by 9 sites according to Drupal.org. Now, we have talked before on the podcast about a couple of ways you could use AI to generate images directly within a Drupal website. One used all the latest OpenAI APIs, and the other had media library integration, though it only worked through its own admin form. Both were built to specifically use DALL-E, OpenAI's image generation service. This new module is a big leap forward because it's based on Drupal's powerful and rapidly innovating AI module, so it can work with multiple AI image generation services. What's more, AI media image plugs into the Drupal core media system, so you can use the tool to generate images directly within the media library, including when you open it up in a modal to populate an entity reference field. This makes it significantly more intuitive to use this capability as part of a normal content creation flow. There are a couple of things that may not be intuitive when you first start using AI media image. For example, by default, it uses the prompt you used to create the image as the alt text that will be saved to the media library. That seems unexpected to me, but if the prompt exceeds the max alt text length of 255 characters, then it will throw an error, and then you can overwrite the value of the prompt field to contain proper alt text before saving the image to the media library. This is one of the open issues mentioned earlier, and resolving it would really improve the experience of using this module. I got to play around with this module while preparing a demo for a session about AI I delivered with Mike Anello at Florida Drupal Camp this past weekend. So we'll try to include a link in the notes, allowing our listeners to watch that recording and see this module in action. But let's talk about AI media image.
So I have mixed feelings about these types of modules now because it's helpful because clients do want this functionality and these features, and it's nice to have this flexibility. I mean, I think it is one of the strengths of Drupal that you can integrate with these things in kind of a standard manner. As as a user myself, though, I don't know about you guys, but I have such like AI image fatigue. I don't know what else to describe it as.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, uh, mm, mixed feelings. I mean, like for me, like I do use, and you just mentioned this, I do use AI images on my blog posts because, if anybody's seen my design capabilities, they understand. They'd completely understand. Um, I do feel like all images are like AI generated now, but I think bringing it right into Drupal is super nice because, for me, my workflow is like write a blog post, then like provide a link to the AI and be like, give me an image based on this blog post, and then it goes and does it, and then I have to like work with the AI to be like, oh, don't do that, do this, a little lighter, a little darker, right? Um, Being able to do kind of all of that right within Drupal. And you might have mentioned this, Martin, but does it also like is it contextualized? Like, could you say like, use the content on this page to develop the image as opposed to like just writing out like a full blown prompt?
So the way it works today is it does just give you sort of a text area to write your prompt. One of the
Mm.
things that we actually included in the demo was basically creating a field on your content type where you use an AI automator to generate the prompt for you. And then that can give you a rich prompt that includes, like, it's contextual to what you've written. And then you can copy and paste that into the prompt field. And that actually gives a much better result. So that's sort of almost like a manual way to kind of use chaining, potentially multiple services that way. So it's possible. I would say, there's definitely ways that sort of the overall experience of using this module could probably be better, including what you're describing as making it easier to have it be more contextual automatically.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, I do like, I mean, AI image kind of feelings aside, I do like that this is integrating with the AI module and media library. I think like this is kind of showing the power of the ecosystem of lots of tools in a framework that can all work well together. Um, so whether or not you like it, I think it shows that we're building lots of good pieces for building kind of content tools.
And correct me where I'm wrong because you guys may know more about this than I do, but depending on what AI image generation service you're using, you may get better images generated, right? So like truth be told, I usually use like Chat GPT or whatever Chat GPT is using for my image generation. But like if you're using like some of the other image services out there, like you probably get better image quality, true, false?
I think at least from what I've heard, it really depends on what it is that you're looking for. I think each of them have their strengths. For a while, Midjourney was kind of the one that, particularly for sort of illustration style, or even some of the more photorealistic ones, was much better. But Dolly 3 that came out, I want to say second half of last year, kind of helped to move it forward in some pretty substantial ways. Some of the other ones I think can do better if you're actually looking to have text as part of your images. So for a while, like that was sort of a very telltale sign of an AI generated image, was that like it could never actually include like properly rendered text. It would always use this sort of like weird sort of gibberish. Um, so I think it tends to depend on which one, and I think it's one of those things where it's a bit of an arms race, and there's always kind of different models creating newer releases that do
Yeah.
better in some ways. So it's probably going
I
to be a changing landscape.
I think that's one of the things that's gonna be really powerful as the AI module and ecosystem evolves, is the ability to kinda swap these things out under the hood. Because right now, until you really get the agents and the chaining and all that stuff in, right now, you're really limited to individual fields, and when you create that field, it kinda saying, like, use like, when you want real fine-tuned control, you're saying, "Use this service, use this prompt, use this." But I think really the ability to be like, "Hey, I have an image." When there's image requests, do XYZ, use this service and be able to just change that service under the hood without affecting all the different fields using it, I think will be really, really powerful. But, um,
I
and
just had
and
a
that's definitely the direction they're moving in.
I just had a great idea that like it would be awesome if like part of this module were like use this prompt and every time somebody comes to this page or like once a week, just change the image for this blog post.
Oh
Right.
god.
It just
Oh,
went out and like got a new AI image every week and just added it to the blog post. That'd be pretty awesome.
But then, like, Varnish will get angry and yells caching
Once
issues.
a week, who cares?
but then the SEO
Um
would
Well,
show that you updated it recently and
oh, could be a
yeah,
little. Go ahead, Martin.
I
What do
do
you
want,
got?
yeah.
I would say though that probably violates one of the AI best practices that folks will hear about if they watch the talk, which is really the principle of having kind of a human in the loop. So personally, I would have huge misgivings about saying an AI generated image is going to be live on my blog post without me seeing it first, and potentially
yeah.
generating like one on a regular basis, like substantially increases the chance that one of them will be inappropriate in some way.
Oh, Martin, too much oversight.
I do wanna put out a challenge. I think, like, as no, seriously. So, like, AI images are great, but in the we've seen, like, there's a lot of, like, they're kind of all generating a lot of similar stuff. Like, Unsplash is really good. Flickr is still, like, a thing and lets you search for royalty-free images. And, like, I worked on a Google site recently. Like, I wanted a site in, like, 30 minutes, and I build it on Google Sites because it's easy and free and quick, and yes.
Yeah.
But, like, pretty much everything else has, like, search the web, search another service for an image. Wouldn't it be cool if, in addition to generating images with tons of CPU cycles, we could alternatively, you know, search the web or other platforms all in the same space, right? So you could generate
Yeah.
your
Mm,
own, you can search a bunch of different repositories. All of those go into media library and can exist on your site. And there are lots of different ways to find the content that you need.
yeah.
I like that.
I mean,
That
there
sounds that
is
sounds to me like Squarespace.
I mean, there
Oh,
is
I
a
said
media
it. I
entity.
said it. Go ahead,
There
Martin.
is a media entity Unsplash module, so potentially, maybe you could have all of those options, right? Like go into your media library, you have the ability to either use one of the ones that it's already there, upload a new one, AI generate one, or even go out to Unsplash. So there's probably integrations with other royalty free libraries as well. So giving your content authors that option to sort of maybe use AI as sort of the weapon of last resort in a way.
Seems like it could be a great
Wow.
idea.
I've been enlightened because I did not know that Unsplash was a thing. So now maybe I won't use AI images anymore. Maybe I'll just search for a couple of terms here and use their images.
Yeah. And I mean,
Yep.
Flickr does have a checkbox on there too, to like just show royalty free or like Creative Commons stuff. And I've used that for decades and it's still there and it's great.
Is Flickr still owned by Yahoo?
I
No,
believe
it's
so.
owned
Wait,
by
really?
SmugMug now.
Oh, really? When did
Interesting.
that sale happen?
Yeah.
All
But
right.
they have like they've committed a ton of stuff to like archival, there's like hundreds of thousands of archival images on there too. It's a whole other conversation.
Interesting. So one last note about the AI media image module. The user's name Coffee Machine is absolutely fabulous, and I'm a little bit upset that I didn't think of it. It's also Coffey for anybody that's interested in looking that up. But props to that Drupal user for a very creative D.O username. Okay, Martin, if folks wanted to get a hold of you, talk about modules, suggest a module of the week, how best can they do that?
We're always happy to talk about interesting projects in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as Man Clue on all of the Drupal and social channels.
Great. Thanks, Martin.
See you next week.
All right, let's move on to our primary topic, which is to talk about OpenY. But before we can really dive in and have an in-depth conversation about it, I think it'd probably be best if our users had a little bit of an overview of what OpenY is. So, Avi, can you help us out with that? Can you tell us kind of what is OpenY?
Yeah. So, I mean, from the project page, OpenY is it's a content management system distribution uh, that has a ton of functionalities and useful modules for YMCAs and digital partners. I haven't actually read that in a while, uh, so it's interesting. But yeah, OpenY is a Drupal distribution by and for YMCAs, and so it started in 2016. It was a collaboration by a bunch of different Ys, and it's slowly kind of grown over almost a decade to encompass a ton of functionality that is common across Ys. It has integrations with a number of the different service providers and APIs that many of them use. And it ties into the Drupal ecosystem and leverages a ton of the community resources that Drupal has as well, adding on a bunch of kind of layers for Y specific stuff.
And in doing some googling, we see references to like YMCA web services. Can you kind of tell us what the difference is between YMCA web services and OpenY?
Sure. The short answer is nothing. The slightly longer answer is the name. There was a kind of ownership transition a couple years ago, and the name changed from OpenY to YMCA Website Services. It's all the same code. It's all still free and open. We just changed the name.
And does that have something to do with like the YMCA organization like taking it over versus like individual YMCAs kind of running things?
Yeah. Sorry, the governing body of YMCA's in the US is called YUSA, and they eventually took over ownership and responsibility for the code base. When they
Got it.
did that, it switched from being OpenY to YMCA Web Services.
Got it.
OpenY's history is prior to it being a distribution, it was the brainchild of one association, YMCA the Twin Cities, now called YMCA the North. I think they're the third largest association in North America, but they built their Drupal 8 site, a very enterprise-based YMCA association site, and they had the idea to effectively give away the code. They started collaborating with some of the larger associations. They started sharing code, and a kind of a cost-sharing mechanism was spun up for them to turn it into a distro and release it in 2017.
Wow, there's a lot of synergy there between like how YMCA's operate and like the open source community. I'm sure we'll hear more about that as we continue to discuss.
So, Brent, why do you think the OpenY is so important to the YMCA, kind of as a organization, but also to the individual? Are they franchises? Is that the term? Or
It's called a federated nonprofit model. Effectively, they're essentially governed. They have a charter that they have to adhere to. They have the same brand standards, but each one runs autonomously from the other.
okay, and why? How does OpenY kind of fit into that? Why is it so important to the organization?
Well, they're each association is unique in, somewhere between 10 and 30% of what their operations are. So a lot of Ys are very traditional in what you understand a YMCA to be, their facilities, their gym memberships, their swimming lessons, that kind of thing. There's other associations that are more nuanced to the region. They may be very camp focused, or maybe after school childcare. But for the most part, they have this kind of shared attribute, the shared brand standard. But they all run autonomously. They use their own systems, third party systems. They have their own financial operations, and they're vastly different in size and scale. So federated is great for the fact that they can be unique to the regions and the people in which they serve, but it's bad in the sense that they have to basically recreate everything all the time, even though a lot of what they do is shared. And that's where OpenY, the idea for OpenY was really born. It gave them the base for which they could all use, and they all share the same brand standards and a lot of the same kind of website requirements. But it was also customizable and had unique features based on the Y, the uniqueness of the individual Y association.
Yeah, and there's a kind of funny running joke, I feel like, within the Y space where, like, if you've seen one Y, you've seen one Y. Uh, but at the same time, like, they all have different things that they do, like Brent said, and they all operate independently. But at the same time, you know, the swim and the gym and the childcare and there are a lot of kind of core functions that folks have been able to consolidate on.
One of the best things about the platform is that it raised the floor for digital for the associations. Because I mean, if you go to a facility in Decatur, Illinois, you expect the YMCA experience versus if you go to one in Brooklyn, New York, and you're going to get vastly different online experiences, even though the in-person experiences are largely consistent. So the smaller associations just simply didn't have the resources to do digital at the scale that someone like New York or Dallas or Los Angeles does. And OpenY really leveled the playing field for them.
So I'm going to ask a question, Avi, to you, and you may not know the answer. I suspect you probably do, but like, how many Ys are there, either globally or just in the US?
Yeah, I do. We've got some data on that. I don't know. So globally, Brent, I don't know if you know any more about this, but each national YMCA association is pretty much independent, and there is like a
Mm,
global association of YMCAs, but it's much looser from what I understand.
got it.
So we work with YMCAs in the US and Canada and ImageX, and that's really kind of been the focus of OpenY.
Mhm,
So I don't have data on Canada. So why Canada is its own kind of independent overseeing body.
mhm,
YMCA of the USA its own thing. There are almost 800 YMCA associations in the USA, and each association is comprised of between one and dozens of branches, camps, facilities, etc. So there are thousands of YMCA, you know, points, locations in the US. We ran some numbers last year on those. About 180 of the 800 associations in the US are running Drupal in some way or another. But those represent, we've figured out, um, probably close to half of the actual member base. Um, of the like 10 biggest US metro areas, 5 of those are running Drupal. Uh, we manage ImageX. We run both DC, or sorry, both New York and LA, um, a handful of others too. So it's a big, it's a big number.
It's awesome because you answered my next question seamlessly. I didn't even have to ask it. So, if I'm doing my math correctly, and I'm not good at math, so please correct me if I'm wrong. So, about an eighth of the Ys in the US and Canada are using OpenY or Drupal in some way, shape, or form.
Sounds like a quarter. Is it a
Probably
quarter?
more,
Yeah.
what, 20% quarter, somewhere in
Okay.
that range.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I told you, not good at math. All right. But thanks. Thanks for the correction there. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
I mean that's pretty good. I mean and as far as you kind of raised another question for me there, like is there like an instance where a Y might use Drupal and not use OpenY?
Yeah.
It,
Sure.
it, because of the fact that they're autonomous, they can choose whatever they want. There's a lot of associations out there that have marketing teams that prefer a certain CMS. There are third-party systems, primarily CRMs, that work with a lot of the Ys. There's one called Daxco in particular, and they offer a kind of a free website tool if you use their CRM, which is kind of a good fit for the smaller associations that really don't have the budget, time, or competence to work to build a site or work with an agency. But yes, there are some associations that have built a site previously on Drupal and they want a very custom experience, and they have a very technically competent team, and they don't want to be kind of boxed into the pre-configured nature of the distribution.
There are also there's at least one like fork of OpenY that came off a few years ago. I think they're still running Drupal 7, but yeah, they're you know everybody chooses their own path. That's the great thing about open source.
So how about on the technology side? You've mentioned that each Y is kind of independent of each other, but is the same if they're going to adopt OpenY, is the same true there? Like, can you provide all of the underlying hosting services, or is it really just you use this, you can provide bug reports, feature requests, whatever, and contribute back? Like, how does the actual nitty gritty, a Y decides they want to use OpenY, how does that piece work, Brent?
I think that's probably a better question for Avi, actually.
Okay, Avi, how about you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So as we've said, as kind of Brent laid out, the governance structure is relatively loose. There's they have a set of brand standards and a charter that they need to uphold, but everybody kind of makes their own decisions at the association level. Um, and so, from that point, each association operates like any other nonprofit or business, or et
Mm.
cetera. So they go to, they might go to a local IT shop. They might come to a Drupal agency if they know they're looking at CMSs. Um, there's also some conferences that the Y runs that different providers will go to, and so they go out into the world. They find their own providers, whether that's for their website, for their CRM, for the swimming pool lane reservation system, everything. So they all kind of go out in the world, make their own decisions about things. They also, decide on hosting independently. So they may go out and bid a number of hosting providers before they kind of have their web platform. Brent, you work on that side a little bit more than I do.
Yeah, I mean, most of the associations that use OpenY typically will use one of the more notable Drupal hosting providers. The more enterprise platforms like Acquia and Pantheon tend to be a little bit too expensive at times for the mid-sized Ys. The larger Ys tend to use those ones. There's a number of nonprofit specific hosting providers, like One Each Technologies as an example out of Phoenix. And then, of course, you see the commoditized type of hosting providers being used, like DigitalOcean and GoDaddy and that kind of thing.
So, like my th- this is going to be a question, guys. So brace yourselves. Like in my head, right? I've been working for the last 3 years on like a platform, as a service kind of model for definitely not nonprofit, be a big pharma and different brands that big pharma is supporting, right? And like there's a lot of benefits in that model of like cost savings and streamlining maintenance and streamlining feature releases and things like that. I'm wondering why doesn't the YMCA like association, right, at the national level, or maybe the Americas or the US and Canada team up, I don't know, but like why don't they create like a platform as a service or like a huge multi-site to support Ys and kind of reduce the maintenance and cost around website development?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so the uniqueness or the perceived uniqueness of each association is primarily the reason why they don't. You wouldn't get buying, and they can't actually mandate that you use anything. So, if anything, they should have a shared CRM because it would make life a whole lot easier if each association was using the same CRM system and all that data was exchanged properly. And if I was using that Decatur, Illinois example, if I was on vacation in New York, I could just go to New York's and my membership would just work across the board. So it would probably make sense for them to start there rather than the front end website as a service. But that was attempted a couple decades ago, and my understanding is it failed spectacularly. So I think the autonomous nature of the model and them wanting to do their own things that work best for them, that's essentially why you haven't seen it. I also think that the governing bodies don't have the budgets nor technical competencies to pull off a nationwide platform of that degree.
Interesting. So that being said, if there were the ability to have a highly customizable version of Drupal that Wise could choose if they wanted to, they still have choice, right?
Yep.
Then that could be like a path forward or a future state for OpenY, is kind of what I'm hearing. Maybe.
That effectively is OpenY if you think about it. I mean, obviously, slap my hands if you feel otherwise, but that's the general use case. OpenY has kind of been built for everybody, and therefore it's been built for nobody. So it kind of the 60 or 70% of Ys kind of fall into the maybe not that many, maybe closer to 40 to 50% of Ys fall into this kind of one standard deviation from each other. On the extreme ends, you've got really small and really big that may not be a great fit. But for a lot of Ys, you've got this distribution that can save you probably at least half of what a custom Drupal site would cost if you're building it from scratch. At least half, depending on the agency you're working with and the type of design process you go through and how custom it is, etc.
Right.
So it's great for a lot of Ys, but it doesn't fit for certain Ys.
Right.
And even the ones that it fits well for, they've got their own desire to do different things, etc. And they may want to use WordPress or something else.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, so OpenY is a distribution that anybody can take and use. It is, that is different from running a platform as a service where everybody's kind of everybody is funneled into like a very kind of narrow implementation of that thing. It's funny, Stephen gave me the like 5 questions to answer that'll be in the next newsletter. And
Spoiler alert.
spoiler alert. But I actually ran another giant platform as a service when I was at University of Chicago, and it ran into similar issues. Governance on a platform that big is really hard, and if you can't kind of very narrowly focus it, you run into like feature creep and cost creep very, very quickly.
Yep.
And we had 300 sites that all ended up on WordPress because Drupal, because we couldn't fit them into a governance model that made the cost work, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a really, Drupal is really great at that. Multi-site, I still think multi-site is like really cool and amazing. I've run multiple 100 site instances, but the failure of multi-site is almost always governance in
Yep.
my opinion.
I could not agree with you more. In my 3 years working on this project, like literally every week/month, I would say like, hey, it's not a technology problem, it's a governance problem, right? You have to have really good governance and a really good plan how to implement it. I mean, it is possible to give the end user ultimate flexibility and be on a platform as a service. I also love multi-site, which people will fight me on, I'm sure. But yeah,
Be on your side.
Oh, I appreciate that, Avi. I'm actually giving a talk about how to build your own web platform at Drupal Camp, New Jersey, in the middle of March, and it a lot of it is going to focus on kind of the budgetary wins and the governance that you need to kind of implement, which, surprise, shocker, really closely mirrors an open source kind of mentality and governance. So, yeah,
I will.
interesting.
I will add one more thing to that. Brent, you mentioned the kind of like centralized CRM, kind of a pitch for like go getting a Y membership. The Y does have this concept of nationwide membership, and there's reciprocal membership among not all, but a vast majority of the Ys in the US. So if I have a membership to the Y of Chicago, Metro Chicago. Uh, I can go to Ys all over the country and use that membership there as well. If I'm
Interesting.
vacationing, if I'm going for a business trip or whatever, and those all um, this I worked at YUSA for a bit and uh, got a little bit of insight into these things. But there is you know, in order to do that nationwide membership, they have to take data from a whole lot of different CRMs and consolidate them into one central source, and then again syndicate that out to all of the associations. It's millions and millions of records there's like huge amounts of resources that go into making all of that work.
Yep.
It's super cool, and I barely kind of just like got a little peek into how that all works, but it's pretty neat.
Wow.
So shifting gears a little bit from the show notes, this makes me think of how do you market OpenY internally? I don't know if it's internal actually at this point, but how do you kind of market OpenY to other YMCAs and try to convince them then that OpenY is the way to go if they're all kind of making their own internal decisions?
It's a great question, Nick. So from 2017 to about 2000, mid 2020, the OpenY was owned and kind of governed essentially by YMCA, the Twin Cities, and there was a kind of a group of a board, if you will, of other associations that were using it that kind of consulted and helped manage the roadmap for it. During that time, the the North or Twin Cities back in those days, they kind of had a they paid for effectively the community side. So they had people that were spreading the gospel, if you will. At the executive leadership level, they were attending all the YMCA specific conferences, of which there are many. And they were kind of pitching OpenY. They were speaking. They had a booth. They had agencies like ImageX, and at the time, FFW was heavily involved. Go to these as well and do sponsorships. The CRM providers. So they really drove the community, and they saw adoption go from a handful up to that kind of 180 that Avi mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, that's been the Achilles heel of OpenY in the last few years since it was taken over by YUSA. They've really just focused on the technology portion, and the community side is kind of fallen by the wayside. So we've seen adoption kind of plateau in the last several years, and that's really the next. That's what's going to have to be solved in the evolution of that to make this thing work and to get to reach the next level of adoption.
Hmm.
So I'm interested here in like who pays for what. And what I mean by that is like you have a Y and they're like, we need a new website. And they hear about OpenY and they're like, "That sounds great. Drupal is free, distribution is free, right?" So
Mhm.
as a Y, am I simply paying for a company to implement OpenY and then the hosting costs? Is there some sort of like, I don't know, fee that I'm paying to Y, like the greater Y association to like support more development of this behind the scenes? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, also it's evolved from the beginning. So in the beginning, effectively it was grassroots. So all the associations that were participating elected to fundraise and donate on an annual basis to the collective development. And then a few took on a disproportionate cost burden of that. So YMCA the North, and then a few of the larger ones that were really spearheading it. The governing body YUSA contributed to that for quite some time, and then when they took it over, they bared the cost of the maintenance and the upkeep of the code base, which they still do to this day. That's another thing that the OpenY is going to have, or YMCA Web Services, whatever you want to call it. It's going to have to solve that effectively. Right now, it's free to download because YUSA bears the cost of the maintenance of it. And then so an association really either is paying their own internal staff to implement it or an agency like ImageX. There is no fee to use it at this point. It was considered, and it was very quickly rejected by the community, just simply because they're the ones who largely funded it to get it to where it was. So they kind of revolted at the idea of having to pay a governing body to use the code that they paid to be developed.
So it's like it's almost like a value add then for Wise, right? Because they're I don't want to say they're getting it for free, but they have this resource available to them from the, you know, the national level that they can use if they choose.
Yeah, and
Well,
I mean, it's from the national level, it's in their own best interest to do this because, like I said, the digital experience of a small Y association can be absolutely atrocious, and I don't think I'm being too harsh by saying that. If you look at some of the smaller YMCA sites, they don't meet the standard of digital in 2025 by a large degree. A lot of them aren't even brand compliant. They're Wix or Squarespace sites. It's like, just tons of content on one landing page kind of thing. So it's in their best interest to raise the digital floor across the movement, and this is a very effective way of doing it.
I mean, they also, it kind of functions as a shared service too. As franchises, the Ys are all paying YUSA, fees, and so when it kind of shifted from a community source model to a centralized model, it was really just shifting the fee structure, right? They instead of paying directly into this bucket for OpenY, now like part of the fees that all of the Ys were paying were going towards the development, and so it's kind of evolves in that. But also, as with any Drupal project, right? Um, Y North, is an example. They are working on a new integration with a new provider. Um, so in the process of building their site, just like we would with any other Drupal site, just like we talked about last week with Steve,
I was going to ask
um,
about that. Keep
yeah.
going.
So, they want to build something for a new CRM. They know that half a dozen other Ys are going to be adopting the CRM in the next 6 months. So we have a really great community and mostly tacit agreement with the Ys that they will help each other because the YMCA Metro Chicago is not competing with YMCA Twin Cities, is not competing with YMCA
Right.
Dallas. Like so they the Ys have been really active at supporting each other and saying we're okay with with developing this feature and paying for it so that other Ys can have the benefit.
I know it's not a platform as a service, but that's another benefit to the platform as a service model, right? Whether it's a
Yeah,
distribution or an actual platform, like you guys can, like people can collectively pool their resources to get features built, and typically it's cheaper for everybody, right?
Yeah, and
absolutely.
that's where the agencies play a big role because ImageX works with the kind of the largest 40 associations, and so oftentimes we'll get wind of a couple of them at the same time. We're thinking about building some integration, like I think you're talking about Traction Rec, if I'm not mistaken, Abby, which
Yeah.
is a Salesforce pre-configured CRM version for YMCA's and that kind of business model. And so we'll get wind of a few that are trying to, or at least contemplating a similar feature or integration,
Yeah.
and then we'll connect the dots. Whereas before, they would have had to have networked and known about the other association, what they're doing, and
Right.
sometimes that does happen.
So shifting gears again, that makes me wonder then, how do you manage feature requests and things like that? Because it is open source, it is on Drupal.org, it's open. So these smaller organizations can put in a custom module or a contributed module, or they can put in an issue and provide feedback. Like, who's kind of on the technological side, who's kind of managing? I know you said that the US and Canada organizations are in charge, but like who's the one in charge of merging those merge requests and doing the releases and deciding whether or not a feature should be a separate module or should just be part of the distribution or if it should be something custom? Like who's kind of handling that side of it? Is that
Yeah. Yeah, and so you'd have to break that up between pre-2020 and then post-2020. So pre-2020, ultimately that responsibility was the YMCA of the North with the committee, the product committee that they had. So they would take requests for features to feature development. They would take code investments from individual associations that had built something interesting with their agency partner that wanted to contribute it back. And then they would basically decide on the budget that was available and then the demand for that feature across the movement, and they would do a prioritization of backlog
Okay.
based approach. Since then, it's really been YUSA, which largely follows the same protocols actually. And so they work with agency partners, Interjex being one of them. There's a few others like Five Jars. I'm just going to name drop just so I'm not just saying my own agency. Five Jars or IT Care, which are Ukrainian-based organizations. And then there's a kind of an openly shared roadmap, and they'll decide. YUSA will decide based on the demand of the feature.
Eh,
Yeah.
eh, Another oddball question, actually. Are there people using OpenY that are not YMCA organizations that you're aware of?
That's a good question. A few years ago, we were approached. ImageX was approached by JCC, who wanted to look
Okay.
at using the code base for their own purposes. In the end, we ended up building that site, JCC Manhattan, as a custom Drupal implementation. They had aspirations of doing like an open JCC model, but unfortunately, it never got past Manhattan. They weren't able to kind of get it off the ground. But that's the only one, to my knowledge, that was ever discussed. Avi, you might know of something else.
No, I was gonna say I don't know of any. The OpenWise is very opinionated. The brand standards, a lot of assumptions about the services are kind of baked in to the core of the code base. But with that said, I think a lot of the pieces mm, I think could be reusable. We've built, we kind of moved from this like the profile model where like every single module lives in one giant zip file and it's impossible to do anything with, to decoupling a lot of that functionality a couple years ago. And now with Composer, we just have one composer.json that includes all the modules. So there are dozens of modules, each single component with a new layout builder, kind of the stuff that we have is a separate module. And so what we've tried to do is abstract a lot of those pieces so that somebody could go in and say, pick up those pieces and retheme them and make them work with something different.
All right. So, Avi, I've got like so many questions right now. Um, so the first one, going back to what Nick was kind of talking about, and like governance of distribution and features and adding new features, right? So, we all know here, like when you have a distribution, you kind of install it, and then like updating it is kind of like it could be a little on the more difficult side. Like, how are you guys handling that? Is that like we're adding new modules and you're just bringing those modules in and turning them on to add those features and add those updates, or is there some sort of like update path?
Well, I would refer listeners to last week's module of the week for a little bit more info on that.
Ah, I see. All right.
But
Yes.
yeah, so yeah, I mean, for a long time in the development of the distribution, um, we have been very active at making sure that that all of the new functionality we build works for both brand new installs and for updates.
Yeah.
And so, like, we're literally, I mean, I've been doing this for years. I have to, build a feature, make sure it has the right config to install, um, make sure that we have update hooks to update from some old version, and it's we kind of have to limit sort of like browser support, right? You have to be like, okay, I'm not supporting IE11 anymore. We're not going to support going straight from like this 3-year-old version of OpenY to the new version. But we basically had like a running database dump that was between 6 and 12 months old, and made sure that the update hooks were always able to run successfully from that too. And so it's a really time consuming process. It's a really active process and a decision that was made in the development cycle. But we did really, really well, so that when we shipped a feature, it would work straight out of the box. And the you know 100 plus associations that are still maintaining their sites based on an install from some point in the last handful of years, were able to get that and use it, run update database updates, and also like not break all of the existing customizations that they have.
Right. So on that same thread and thought line, right? Is there some talk maybe about moving away from a distro and moving to a recipe?
Yeah, I feel like we've had like bits and pieces of this in the last couple weeks. Nick had mentioned that there's the config update actions a couple weeks ago. I've I haven't been active in the recipe kind of conversations in general. Um, but I think it's a really powerful tool, and I think there's a lot of potential there. Um, I really do believe that distributions have value that is separate from recipes, and somebody who wants to, who's buying into a distribution model, which they're relatively rare, but like a lot of universities have them, a lot of these kind of more centralized things do. Um, I think recipes is still not solved for, you know, I want to install this thing and then keep getting new stuff from a centralized source.
Yeah,
So I
recipes
think,
really aren't
yeah,
meant for that
yeah.
use case.
Well, I mean, so like the way I'm looking at it, and maybe I'm not looking at the full picture, but like, your distribution is a starting point. There could be a starting point recipe, right? And then each feature that you bring in, right, is an update, right, to the original distribution, which could be done by just bringing in additional recipes, right? Which would still give you that layer of like, hey, I'm not going to mess up any custom work that you've done or anything that
Well, no,
um
that's where probably the biggest gap is. You can't do things in recipes like, "Hey, we have this new field, but check to see if this other field exists before you do that, because if they have that other field and they did something custom, we don't want to affect that." Like, you can do as part of your update hook, you can do a lot of logic to be like, "Hey, we know that there's these diversions from our base that we wanna handle this way." Or where you're writing an update hook that basically says, "Hey, this person built this really cool tool. We've rebuilt it for everybody else, but we need to migrate their like specific implementation into the generic one."
sure.
You can't do that with recipes.
So I mean, I guess
Recipes,
I guess results may vary. You'd obviously still have to do some testing, but
yeah,
I think but like you said, John, I think it could be a good tool for kind of giving folks a number of different starting points. There's, OpenY has a bunch of custom code in there to add options in the install process. So there are a couple different kind of bundles of modules that get installed. But installing OpenY from scratch takes like, just because there's so many modules that have to run and get config installed.
like
uh,
like
oh,
half an
hey,
hour of like looking at a status bar.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
all right.
not anymore. After 11.2, I guarantee you it's gonna be significantly faster.
Wait, after what?
11.2.
11.2. Oh, interesting.
Oh,
Okay.
we didn't touch on that. Like, what version of Drupal you guys running?
We're currently 10.3
Oh, all
is
right.
supported, and we're working on 10.4 and 11 support coming out first
No, you guys are
quarter
you guys are current. You're
year.
you're good.
Yeah.
Just make sure you're aware that you can't go from 10.4 to 11.0. If you upgrade to 10.4, you have to go to 11.1.
Okay.
That's
That's
kind
good
of
to know.
The install profile being so large is like that's going back to what we talked about earlier, how it's been built for everyone and nobody at the same time. Because
yeah.
it's over time they've just added more and more to try to solve every single use case. When we first started installing OpenY for associations, we had to have a custom budget for things that weren't in the distro that needed to be built, features, integrations, etc.
Yeah.
Now our entire discovery process is based on what they don't need that we're turning off or not or configuring
That's
differently for them.
interesting.
So it's very different over the last 8 years how it's evolved.
20% are using OpenY and 60% are using Daxco. What's the other 20% using? Is that like WordPress weird space?
So when I say 60% are using Daxco, I mean as a CRM system. They're
Okay.
the dominant CRM player in the YMCA space. The other 40% are split between a bunch of proprietary CRMs that have been built around the YMCA business model, like Personify. What's the other ones? ActiveNet is another one that does a lot with parks and recreation. Traction Rec, which is a spinoff of Traction on Demand, which is a Salesforce implementation company. They're getting a lot of momentum as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. But some of the CRMs also do front end stuff. So like I think Daxco has some sites that they do front ends for as well.
Yeah, Daxco has a very simple WordPress offering. So if you use them for their CRM, they'll give you basically a throw-in website because all their stuff just links to their CRM pages anyway.
We've talked a lot about the technology here, right? So like they get, a distribution, they get a bunch of features, they get a bunch of integrations. But like that's only half a website, guys. What is like the theming and design look like? Like what's included in OpenY as far as like do I then have to like get a creative agency involved to design my site and like theme it, or is there like a built-in theme that I can kind of like customize?
Yeah. So a huge chunk of the work that we worked on really the last like 2 years has been building out a brand new set of layout builder components with a brand new theme and design. And so as we talked about, there are some things that the Y is pretty strict about. The brand standards are one of them. So YUSA produces 60-page PDF brand guide that has a lot of very kind of detailed guidance that all of the Ys need to abide by. And so throughout this process, working with YUSA, designers at Minjax, and all of the kind of teams involved, we created a new design with all these components. There was actually, I mean, our FAs went through and cataloged all of the paragraphs that like 30 or 40 different sites were using to understand like the data models and the page building functionality that was involved. We created, a smaller list of layout builder blocks to build from. And so, yeah, so now, as I said, you can go to the sandbox, you can see examples of these pages. We have 15 or so blocks. Each of those blocks has a number of different styles. And so like we have one banner block that has 5 different variants, which are kind of different designs of the banner. Also, all of that mm, is you can change the colorways. So YUSA has this kind of big color wheel with lots of kind of paired color palettes. And so the entire look and feel of the new layout builder design is now themable based on these color palettes. So you can change the entire colorway for a page just by kind of
Wow.
clicking one button in layout builder. It's all lots of like CSS variables and stuff behind the scenes. It's super, super fun.
Yeah, but that's a lot more than I thought you would have gotten. Because, but it makes sense if you want to control the brand that much like that. I mean, I feel like mo maybe not most, the most a huge significant portion of all Drupal budgets are theming. So if you can provide a lot of that kind of flexibility out of the box, you're in a way that you can control some of it is super powerful.
Yeah. So if a Y is going to accept the theme out of the box, maybe make a few small customizations, and they're just going to link out to whatever their CRM or other provider is. Like the lift to get a site running is really really low, and like 75% of the time is just building content. Like we've really or laid a really good base for folks, and I think Brent can kind of say more too. Most of most of the costs for our clients are either customizations that they decide they want to do on top of the existing kind of design, or integrations that they either need to customize based on their kind of specific implementations, or brand new kind of things that they're bringing in.
So you mentioned that the roadmap is kind of internally worked on, but it's public. What are some new features coming or some new functionality that's coming to OpenY maybe this year that you're kind of excited about?
Yeah, so the 2025 roadmap is still, in progress. There were a number of things that we had on the list last year that I'd be excited to see happen, but a lot of that's based on budgets. We had, as I said, we built all these layout builder components. I would really love to like transition those to single directory components. They were not originally. We also a lot of the foundation for the design system was built on Bootstrap, but we were using Bootstrap 4. And we had a lot of some really cool plans to update that to Bootstrap 5 and add dark mode, which we have designs for, but we haven't got to implement yet. Um, yeah, on the back end, we do have a couple. We've got a couple new CRMs that are being built out by some of ImageX's wise, and those Traction Rack had started. There are kind of new features being built into those and pushed out as well.
Guys, as we kind of bring this show to a close here, um, Brent, put on your best sales guy hat here and tell me how. And you've already kind of talked about this, so we have a pretty good idea. But like, how does ImageX support OpenY? And I'm assuming the answer to this is yes, but somebody can hire ImageX to develop features for a Y, implement a site for a Y, do all sorts of Y related things, right? True, accurate.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, from the technology side, obviously, we build custom Drupal websites. We build websites using OpenWire web services as the starter kit, if you will, for that process. A lot of what we do for Wise is more about crafting the user experience to meet the uniqueness of their association numbers. What does a content strategy look like for that? What does the user experience look like? That we configure OpenY in a way that best meets the demand for the membership. So that's typically why or how why would use this. And then of course we support the sites ongoing. Wise and nonprofits in general tend to not have a lot of technically competent team members, or if they do, they're completely overwhelmed with the number of hats that they wear internally. So we often support these websites for many years afterwards. Some of the sites that we did back in 2018 we're still supporting to this day. So we're happy to support Wise. It's our portfolio of Wise is probably our the golden child of our portfolio at ImageX because obviously it's nice to help organizations that are making an impact in their communities, which the Wise do. They do a great job of that. There's so much more than just gym memberships and swimming lessons. The impact that they have in their communities. So it's really nice being able to feel like you're supporting the work that they're doing as well.
And I imagine, like, you guys have a many years of experience working with Wise, which adds great value, right? Because it's a very specific organization and a very specific set of needs and abilities that they need to kind of produce.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we call that sector specialization, vertical specialization, whatever it is. But we understand their brand guidelines and standards. We understand what their users are looking to do, and some of the complexities around that. Like when a mom is trying to sign up their three different kids at three different age groups for swim lessons, and they want to use this branch because they've got karate lessons first, and it's easier to go there. And there's a certain amount of nuance and complexity that comes around that booking process that we have a whole lot of experience and a lot of data to support user experience best practices. So those are the types of kind of configuration consultation that we do when we're setting up a site for a new association.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And you know, I think you guys are doing great work and subject matter experts in this space. So that's always helpful. Um, Avi and Brent, thanks for joining us. Avi, thanks for joining us for the last 4 weeks. It's been delightful.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Do you have questions or feedback? You can reach out to Talking Drupal on social media with the handle Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on the Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/td promo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
Thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing the Become a Patron button in the sidebar. All right, Brent, if folks wanted to get a hold of you to talk about ImageX, talk about YMCAs, or just to talk in general, how could they go about doing that?
ImageX.com, imagexmedia.com. Either one of those URLs will get you to us. I can be reached at brent@imagexmedia.com. Always happy to talk web strategy and Drupal and see if we can help organizations accomplish their digital goals.
Awesome. Avi, what about you?
Yeah, I am Froboy in most of the Drupal places and the socials. You can also find me on the MidCamp site. Get your tickets at midcamp.org. Just gonna sneak that in there.
There you go. Nick, what about you?
You can find me online pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find out about me at picozzi.com or at John Picozzi on all the socials and Drupal.org. And you can find out about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.